When that interview ended, most people moved on. But a few didn't. Because once you place 50 Cent, Diddy, and the moment we're living in right now on the same timeline, something doesn't sit right. For years, 50 Cent joked about Diddy. He laughed. He shrugged it off. He treated it like entertainment. And that's exactly why nobody took it seriously. But timing changes how words feel. Today, people aren't rewatching that interview because it's funny. They're rewatching it because of what happened next. Because right now, Diddy isn't just a headline. He's not just a rumor. He's not just another name floating around social media. He's at the center of lawsuits, silence, and an industry that suddenly doesn't want to talk. And that's where 50 Cent comes back into the picture. Not loud at first, not direct, just present. That's the part people are trying to understand. Why now? Why does 50 Cent seem more comfortable talking about Diddy after years of staying casual? And why are people suddenly treating his old jokes like warnings? What makes this uncomfortable is not what 50 Cent is saying today. It's what he was already saying before everything exploded. Back then, it sounded like humor. Now, it sounds like distance. And distance in this industry usually means one thing. Someone knows when to step back. Because here's the thing about the music industry that outsiders rarely understand. Nobody survives at the top by being reckless. People survive by reading rooms early and exiting quietly. That's why people are revisiting every time 50 Cent talked about Diddy without actually saying anything. Every pause, every joke, every moment where he smiled instead of explaining. Those moments age differently once the environment changes. And the environment has definitely changed. Diddy used to be everywhere. Award shows, after parties, social media, public celebrations, public confidence. Now, silence. And silence is loud when someone has spent decades controlling the noise. What made people start connecting dots wasn't one lawsuit or one headline. It was the shift. The moment when Diddy stopped responding the way he always had. And the moment when 50 Cent didn't stop talking but changed how he talked. Because 50 Cent has never been subtle by accident. He understands attention. He understands timing. And he understands when to let other people talk for him. That's why the documentary matters. Not because of what it shows, but because of when it exists. People are asking why 50 Cent would step into this space at all. Why put his name near Diddy's story now, when the situation is already volatile? And that's the wrong question. The better question is, why does it feel like 50 Cent was already positioned for this moment? Because this doesn't look like a reaction. It looks prepared. And preparation doesn't start when headlines drop. It starts when people notice patterns others ignore. This is where viewers usually ask themselves something important, and if you're watching closely, ask it too. If 50 Cent didn't take Diddy seriously before, why does it feel like he took him seriously a long time ago? Quick question before we go further and answer honestly. Do you think 50 Cent is speaking because things are coming out? Or because he already knew how this would end? Let me know what you think, and if you're following this story closely, make sure you're subscribed, because this timeline keeps changing, and most people are only seeing pieces of it. What makes this situation different from past celebrity drama is that nobody is rushing to defend. No coordinated statements, no loud counterattacks, no aggressive denials, just distance. And distance is often the industry's way of protecting itself. People forget that Diddy wasn't just an artist. He was a gatekeeper, connector, a decision maker, which means when his name enters a certain kind of conversation, everyone around him feels it too. That's why so many people are paying attention to who stays quiet and who doesn't. 50 Cent didn't suddenly become brave. He became comfortable. And comfort usually means the risk has shifted. Because in this business, people don't talk when the power is strong. They talk when the power is already moving. This is why the timing feels disturbing to some viewers. Not dramatic, not shocking, disturbing, because it suggests that the real story didn't start when the lawsuits appeared. It started when people began repositioning themselves. And that repositioning happened quietly, long before headlines told the public to look. By the time most people noticed Diddy pulling back, others had already adjusted their distance. And that's where 50 Cent's role becomes more interesting. Not as an accuser, not as a hero, but as someone who never seems surprised. That's what viewers can't ignore now, because surprise is usually visible. And in every clip people are rewatching, 50 Cent doesn't look surprised at all. He looks measured. And when someone that calculated changes tone at the exact moment an empire starts to wobble, people naturally ask why. Not what he knows, not what he's hiding, just why now? And that question doesn't go away. It follows every interview, every headline, every quiet move happening behind the scenes. And once you notice it, it's hard to stop watching. What makes this even more unsettling is how familiar this pattern feels to people who've watched the industry long enough. Because when power starts shifting, it rarely happens in public first. It happens in conversations that never get recorded, in invitations that quietly stop coming, in phone calls that don't get returned. And suddenly, the people who once stood closest start creating space. That's why people aren't just watching Diddy right now. They're watching who's adjusting around him. And 50 Cent sits right in the middle of that adjustment. For years, their relationship existed in this strange public space. Not friends, not enemies, just tension disguised as jokes. 50 Cent made comments that felt harmless. He laughed. He turned moments into punchlines. And the audience followed his lead. But jokes only work when everyone feels safe laughing. And safety is the first thing that disappears when lawsuits enter the room. What changed isn't 50 Cent's voice. It's the silence around Diddy's. Because when controversy surrounds someone with real influence, the industry usually responds fast. Statements, damage control, public reassurance. That didn't happen here. Instead, things went quiet. And quiet doesn't mean nothing is happening. It usually means everything is. People started noticing that Diddy wasn't moving the way he used to. No big responses. No bold appearances. No confident pushback. And that's when old footage began to resurface. Clips of 50 Cent smiling when Diddy's name came up. Moments where he chose humor instead of detail. Times when he didn't explain and didn't need to. Those clips didn't feel important back then. They feel important now, because they show something subtle. 50 Cent never sounded confused. He sounded cautious. And caution doesn't come from gossip. It comes from experience. This is where viewers start to realize something uncomfortable. People like 50 Cent don't survive decades in the industry by guessing wrong. They survive by reading the room early. That's why the documentary announcement landed differently for so many people. Not because it promised shocking revelations, but because it suggested intention. It told people this wasn't impulsive. It wasn't emotional. It wasn't reactive. It looked planned. And when something looks planned in a moment like this, people start asking questions that don't have easy answers. Was 50 Cent waiting for the right moment? Or was he always standing at a safe distance just in case? And more importantly, who else did the same thing? Because when one person starts speaking comfortably, it usually means others already stepped back quietly. That's how these shifts work. Nobody announces it. Nobody explains it. They just stop showing up the same way. What's striking is how fast public perception changed once people noticed this timing. Suddenly, jokes felt like signals. Silence felt strategic. And laughter felt like insulation. Because humor is one of the safest tools in this industry. It lets you say something without being responsible for it. And 50 Cent has always understood that better than most. He's never needed to explain himself fully. He lets people draw their own conclusions, which is exactly what's happening now. People aren't listening for accusations. They're listening for tone. They're watching how words are delivered, not just what's said. And when you rewatch those interviews with today's context, the tone doesn't feel careless. Feels controlled. That's why viewers keep replaying them. Not to hear new information, but to catch what was already there. And every time they do, one thing becomes clearer. 50 Cent wasn't surprised by the shift in attention around Diddy. He wasn't shocked when the headlines changed. He didn't scramble to adjust his stance. He stayed consistent. And consistency in moments like this often means preparation. Because when someone truly doesn't see something coming, their reaction shows it. Confusion, overcorrection, noise. None of that is present here. Instead, there's patience. And patience is usually the sign of someone who understands the pace of collapse. This is where the story stops being about gossip and starts becoming about positioning. Because the industry doesn't run on morality. It runs on leverage. And when leverage weakens, alliances shift. What people are sensing right now isn't scandal. It's recalibration. And 50 Cent's role in that recalibration feels deliberate. Not aggressive. Not emotional. Just perfectly timed. Which brings us back to the question nobody can shake. If this was all coincidence, why does it line up so cleanly? Why do the jokes age into warnings? Why does the silence grow louder? Why does the preparation become visible only after the power starts slipping? That's what's keeping viewers hooked. Because deep down, people know this isn't about one interview or one documentary. It's about how quickly the industry recognizes when protection is no longer guaranteed. And when that realization happens, people act fast but quietly. That's why every move feels measured. Why every word feels chosen. Why no one is rushing to fill the silence. Because silence right now is doing a lot of work. And the more time passes, the more it feels like the loudest moment already happened years ago, hidden inside jokes everyone ignored. Which makes people wonder if the real story isn't unfolding now, but revealing itself in reverse. And once that thought settles in, it's hard to stop watching. Because if timing really is everything, then what comes next was never meant to be sudden. At some point, viewers stop asking what's being said and start asking what's being avoided. And that's where this story quietly turns. Because the real shift doesn't happen when headlines break. It happens when the behavior around a name changes. This is the moment where things feel different. Up until now, Diddy's name carried weight. People corrected themselves when they mentioned him. They softened their tone. They added context. They made sure nothing sounded too direct. That protection used to be automatic. But recently, that instinct feels gone. Not dramatic. Not announced. Just missing. And once people noticed that, everything else started to look different, including 50 Cent. Because the moment protection fades, honesty becomes cheaper. That's the turning point most viewers don't realize they're watching. It's not about a lawsuit. It's not about a documentary. It's not even about public opinion. It's about risk changing hands. For years, saying too much about Diddy carried consequences. Now, staying silent seems to carry them instead. That reversal doesn't happen by accident. It happens when influence weakens behind the scenes. This is where 50 Cent's timing becomes impossible to ignore. He didn't rush forward when the first accusations surfaced. He didn't jump in when social media exploded. He waited. Every time an old clip resurfaces, it adds weight. Every time silence follows a question, it adds meaning. Every time someone chooses not to respond, it adds context. And context is what changes everything. Because when context shifts, history gets reinterpreted. Suddenly, moments that felt small feel intentional. Words that felt casual feel measured. And jokes feel like boundaries being set early. That's why viewers feel pulled in all the way to the end. They're not waiting for confirmation. They're watching alignment. They're watching how stories, timing, and behavior quietly line up. And the alignment doesn't suggest chaos. It suggests inevitability. That's the part people don't like admitting. That some endings don't arrive with explosions. They arrive with calm acceptance. And that's what makes this moment unsettling. Because nobody looks surprised anymore. Not the media. Not the industry. Not the people who've been around long enough to recognize the signs. Especially not 50 Cent. He looks exactly like someone who understands when to speak and when the speaking no longer carries risk. And that's the detail viewers can't unsee. Because if the risk is gone, it didn't disappear overnight. Faded. Quietly. While most people were laughing at jokes they didn't think mattered. This is why the timing keeps bothering people. Not because it feels aggressive, but because it feels correct. Like a move that only makes sense when the board has already shifted. And once you see that, it reframes everything. The interviews, the silence, the documentary, the distance. None of it feels random anymore. It feels like the final stage of something that started years ago. which leaves viewers with one last thought. If this is the moment people feel safe talking, what does that say about the moment before it? And how much of that moment did we never see? That question lingers long after the video ends. So now I want to hear from you. Do you think 50 Cent is reacting to what's happening? Or do you think he simply knew when the timing would finally change? Drop your thoughts in the comments, I read them all. And if you want to stay ahead of stories like this as they unfold, make sure you subscribe, because the loudest parts of these stories are usually the least important. It's the quiet shifts that tell you everything. And waiting is rarely passive in this industry. Waiting means watching. Watching who speaks. Watching who disappears. Watching who suddenly feels safe. And when that safety shifts, the tone shifts with it. This is why people feel unsettled rather than shocked. Because nothing here feels sudden. Feels overdue. Like a door that was already unlocked and someone finally pushed it open. The turning point isn't when 50 Cent started talking louder. It's when he no longer needed to whisper. That's what people are picking up on now. You can hear it in how questions are framed. You can see it in how interviews are edited. You can feel it in how jokes land differently. What once felt playful now feels pointed. And that only happens when context changes. Because jokes don't change. Situations do. This is where the audience realizes something uncomfortable. If 50 Cent felt free enough to position himself this way now, then the industry already decided something internally. Not legally, not publicly, but socially. And social decisions always come first. That's how power actually moves. The moment insiders stop protecting a name, the public conversation follows. Not the other way around. That's the part most people miss. They think public pressure creates silence. In reality, silence creates public pressure. And Diddy's silence has been doing more talking than any statement could. Which brings us back to why this moment feels disturbing. Because if this shift had happened years ago, people would have dismissed it as rivalry. If it happened later, it would have felt opportunistic. But happening now, it feels synchronized. Almost like everyone is reading from a clock the audience can't see. And 50 Cent seems very aware of that clock. He doesn't look nervous. He doesn't look reactive. He doesn't look like someone scrambling to catch up. He looks like someone moving when the window opens. That's the turning point. The realization that this isn't chaos, it's timing. And timing only works when multiple people quietly agree. This is why the documentary matters again. Not for its content, but for its existence. It signals that whatever consequences once existed for touching this story have softened. And that's never random, because if those consequences were still strong, this project wouldn't exist at all. People don't risk their legacy on uncertainty. They move when certainty shifts. That's what makes viewers uneasy, not because of what's being revealed, but because of how calmly it's being revealed. No rush, no panic, no dramatic framing, just patience. And patience often means someone knows the ending won't hurt them. This is the point where the story stops feeling like entertainment and starts feeling like observation. Because now the audience isn't watching Diddy. They're watching the environment around him. And that environment looks very different than it did before. Names that used to defend are absent. Voices that used to counter are quiet. Moments that would have triggered backlash now pass without response. That's not coincidence. That's repositioning. And once repositioning begins, it doesn't reverse. Which is why the timing doesn't just feel interesting. It feels final. Because people don't step back halfway. They either hold the line or let it go. And it looks like the line is being let go. That's the turning point viewers didn't expect to reach. The moment they realized the most important decision already happened off camera. And what we're seeing now is just the aftermath unfolding slowly. That's why every old interview feels heavier. Why every joke feels sharper. Why every pause feels intentional. Because once you know the shift already happened, everything looks like evidence. And that's what makes this moment so hard to ignore. Not the noise, the calm. Because calm is what follows when power quietly changes hands. And once that happens, the story doesn't need to be pushed anymore. It moves on its own. And everyone watching knows it. Once viewers reach this point, something subtle happens. They stop waiting for a big reveal. because they realize the reveal already happened, just not on screen. What they're watching now is the consequence of it. This is where the story settles into something quieter, but heavier. Diddy hasn't disappeared completely, but he's no longer controlling the moment. And in an industry built on control, that matters more than any headline. Because when someone loses control, they don't lose it loudly. They lose it gradually, through distance, through absence, through other people becoming comfortable enough to move on without them. That's why this doesn't feel like a takedown. It feels like a transition. And transitions are always uncomfortable to watch, especially when the people involved don't explain them. 50 Cent doesn't need to say anything new at this stage. The environment is doing it for him.